back to another episode on Front Row on Economy.lk, powered by Dialogue. This week we're chatting to another eminent personality who will definitely, I think, shed light on the trade environment and also talk about some of the local initiatives, things which have actually been implemented on the ground. So it's our pleasure to have on this week's program Arancha Gonzalez, who is the Executive Director of the International Trade Center. Pleasure to have you, ma'am, and thank you for accepting our invite to be on the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So let's get right to it. I think with, especially in Sri Lanka, we're hearing a lot of noise. We don't know whether it's noise or whether it really have an impact. Trade wars with what's going on, and we're seeing a threat towards multilateralism, more unilateral action being taken. And that's in the backdrop of finally you're seeing global growth picking up, trade growth also picking up, and at the start of the year, most forecasters were quite optimistic. Right now, I think some of them are now reducing their growth for trade growth, for world trade growth. Is that a view that maybe ITC concurs with? And in this backdrop, what's the impact on countries like Sri Lanka that are trying to ride into this wave of growth in trade?
So it is true that the winds are blowing much stronger. A hurricane is building in the field of international trade, with measures and countermeasures being taken by big trading partners. We have not yet seen a macro impact of these measures. We have not seen these measures affect global growth or global inflation or global trade volumes, but we have already seen micro impact of these measures, a disruption in value chains, losses of jobs in companies that can no longer justify accessing markets and can therefore no longer justify keeping jobs. We are seeing companies postpone investment decisions as a result of this tit for tat. So the situation is tense and we have to be very careful. I think the big players have to be very careful because this micro impact that today is affecting them can just simply translate to the rest of the world. It can translate to countries like Sri Lanka that are not necessarily actors in this big trade conflict, but that can get affected if the micro impact turns macro. It affects currencies that can see instability. It starts affecting growth of international trade, and through that translates into lower growth prospects. And this would be disastrous for economies like Sri Lanka that are betting precisely on open markets or on international trade, on international investment to generate jobs, to create growth, to alleviate poverty, and in a nutshell, to develop being part of the global economy. So cautious, and investment in dialogue, in cooperation, and in multilateralism is what is needed today.
And I think that's interesting because over the last 12 to 24 months, Sri Lanka has seen a national trade policy. We've signed a new FTA with Singapore. We've had new laws such as the trade remedies law coming in.
Yes.
And just recently, I think we've seen two initiatives, the export strategy coming into play, and also the National Trade Information Portal. How important are the last two? For example, in Sri Lanka, I think in a previous discussion, you mentioned that Sri Lanka is now re-emerging back into that trade map. How important are these initiatives, in particular the last two I mentioned, in making Sri Lanka more serious in this international trade system?
Well, Sri Lanka was historically part of the international trade routes. It was a big player in international trade. For a while, it disappeared from the map. And in a way, Sri Lanka is just trying to come back to the world trade map. And in order to do that, it's doing two things. It's working to make trade possible. This is what you do when you sign trade agreements, when you open other countries' market for the price of opening yours. But it's also working to make trade happen, translate the opportunities into realities on the ground for Sri Lankan businesses, 98% of which are small and medium enterprises that see in trade a means to access markets beyond the 22 million consumers that Sri Lanka market has. The National Export Strategy, the Trade Information Portal are tools to organize national efforts at improving trade competitiveness of Sri Lanka. It's about mapping who needs to do what kind of reforms are necessary, looking at what sectors in the Sri Lankan economy are more prone to thrive in export markets, and there are many, from IT to food processing to boat building. So the question is organizing the efforts nationally. This is what the national export strategy does, and then making sure that the information is translated into trade knowledge for small businesses, so that they have predictability in accessing foreign markets.
And I think with strategies like the NES, key, at least in Sri Lanka, has been is that we've had these great strategies, but we've not really implemented it fully. NES, there's a bit of a difference with it, where the implementation has almost sort of been front-loaded in it. From your experience, and I think ITC's experience in implementing or being a driver of some of these strategies in other countries as well, the countries that have done well in these strategies, what have they done, and what are those fallings of some of the countries which may not have implemented a really good strategy and fallen through?
Yes, you're right. The strategy is only as worth as it is implemented. If it is just a piece of paper that gathers dust in the shelves of a ministry or in the shelves of a chamber of commerce, then we wouldn't have achieved much. But I see a real opportunity to implement this plan here in Sri Lanka. The fact that the government decided in its budget for 2018 to already make an allocation for the implementation of the strategy is, to me, a good signal. Now, what are some of the good practices that Sri Lanka can build on to implement this plan? First, full involvement of the private sector. Governments don't trade. It's private companies who trade. And it's private enterprises that need to be at the forefront of demanding implementation of this agreement. And if they demand it, and demanding it is good, because it means they will be committed to transforming the trade landscape of this country. So full involvement of the private sector is a very important one. Second, a mechanism to track that the plan is being implemented. This is what I heard the Prime Minister say yesterday. He said, I am going every 6 months to check that this trade strategies is implemented. Third is quick wins. This is why the Trade Information Portal is important. It's a quick win. It shows that the government says it's going to deliver a number of things, and the government starts delivering them. And this gives an impulse also to this process of economic and trade reforms, the name of which is pretty simple: competitiveness and more local value added. These are the two legs on which the export performance of this country will lie in the future. If the two are fixed, I have no trouble seeing this country achieve a target of extra 28 billion in exports by 2022 and double that in the next decade.
I think there you heard it from Arancha, who's talked about the macro picture of what's going on in the trade wars. A cyclone is building, and right now micro impacts, but it could really derail what's going on in Sri Lanka and impact it indirectly. Things like the trade portal and NES are great catalysts, but it will really depend on its implementation, and I think she shared 4 insights that will really build and make Sri Lanka maybe a success case in this NES strategy. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
On Economy.lk.
Thank you.
Stay tuned to our listeners for many more videos like this, where we will share key insights from the players that matter.